Our reading today comes from Psalm 69, verses 1 to 16. We are looking at Psalms. Last week we looked at a Psalm. This week we're looking at another Psalm. The Psalms are the workbook or the hymnal book and the prayer book for the people of God. And so these are prayers and hymns that faithful people use to approach God. Listen to these words. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mire, there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters and the flood sweeps over me. I am weary with my cry and my throat is parched. My eyes grow dim with waiting for my God. More in number than the hairs of my head are those who hate me without cause. Many are those who would destroy me, my enemies, who accuse me falsely. What I did not steal, must I now restore? O God, you know my folly. The wrongs I have done are not hidden from you. Do not let those who hope in you be put to shame because of me, O Lord God of hosts. Do not let those who seek you be dishonored because of me, O God of Israel. It is for your sake that I have borne reproach. The shame has covered my face. I have become a stranger to my kindred, an alien to my mother's children. It is zeal for your house that has consumed me. The insults of those who insult you have fallen on me. When I humbled my soul with fasting, they insulted me for doing so. When I made sackcloth my clothing, I became a byword to them. I am the subject of gossip for those who sit in the gate, and the drunkards make songs about me. But as for me, my prayer is to you, O Lord. At an acceptable time, O God, in the abundance of your steadfast love, answer me. With your faithful help, rescue me from sinking in the mire. Let me be delivered from my enemies and from the deep waters. Do not let the flood sweep over me, or the deep shallows swallow me up, or the pit close its mouth over me. Answer me, O Lord, for your steadfast love is good. According to your abundant mercy, turn to me. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In the end, everything will be okay. If it's not okay, it's not yet the end. You may have heard that quote before. It is one which has stayed with me for many years. Originally probably written by a Brazilian writer, Fernando Sabino. If you Google it, you'll probably get a later version of it, which is attributed to John Lennon. It's a quote that situates us right in the middle of the not okay moment. And we are looking for the unknowable, for the unsearchable. Will this moment ever end? When will good come? It's not really a religious quote, but it can be seen from a perspective of our own faith if we choose. My only word of caution about it is not to think of it like the kind of thing that can be like a cheap word of comfort to someone going through that not okay moment. Everything will be okay in the end. It's hard to hear those words in the midst of the struggle. But from the perspective of faith, I think it forces us to question, where is God in that moment, in that in-between moment? And to question, what is it that we do in that uncomfortable moment? And then it answers neither question. Maybe when we hear the psalm for today, we think of our own moments of anxious waiting for God to rescue us. The psalm focuses on an adversarial confrontation. There are literally enemies, and there is fighting and there is shaming. The metaphors for suffering in the psalm are a mixture of terrifying images. There is the destruction of overwhelming floods, and there's that suffocating anxiety of a parched throat right at the moment when we have no more tears to cry. We've been there, all of us. If not in the flesh, certainly in the experience of our loved ones closest to us. We've been in those hospital waiting rooms. Some of us have been in those beds in the hospital. We have waited for those test results, for the doctor to come and speak to us, for the surgery to be done, for the chemo treatments to finally be over. We've been there in our own living rooms, late into the night, waiting for that job to materialize, waiting for our grown child to come back to their senses, waiting for time to heal our wounds. We wait. And as people of faith, we ask God, so where are you now? When will you come to save us from this? And maybe we feel guilty for even having anger at God's absence, that anger sort of stuck in the middle of our throat. Can we really be mad at God? Yeah, we can. It is a disorienting moment to feel like we're temporarily disconnected from God. It's like we're all of a sudden kids again, and we're holding mom's hand in a crowded place, and all of a sudden we lose the hold. And she is lost in the flood of people, and we wonder when we'll ever reach her hand again. And so we wait for that reconnection. And that waiting is scary. Maybe we will recall other times when we waited and God answered. When that estranged relationship was healed. When that job came through. But we're anxious because we also recall all too well when the waiting didn't yield the results we wanted. When the surgery and the chemo didn't do its job. When the business venture failed. And as people of faith, we know about this waiting. Because we are people of faith, we cling to each other and to the promise that God is here somewhere. If we read the psalm as a personal journey, it sends a shiver down our spine. You read it as a community facing distress, we enter an entirely new level of pain. We can read the psalm considering a community who is facing injustice and is just waiting for God's justice to come through. My friend René is at church this morning in Indianapolis, waiting. He saw the reports in the news, and so he knew that today, officers from Immigration Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, were planning to go around major cities in the States on a Sunday morning to round up and deport undocumented immigrants like him. I'm sure he also saw late on Saturday the president decided to delay the planned roundup. So it might not be today for him. It might be next week or next. But as he waits, he keeps on working because that's what he has to do. He came from Guatemala because he could no longer support his family because of the economic collapse of the country and the lawless nature of his community. He's an example to me and to others. He is a deeply faithful Christian man who dared to come to this country without proper documentation because he was either that or drowning in those flood waters from the Psalm. He works. He waits. He sends money home. He waits. He leads the worship band at church. He waits. He pays his rent on time. He waits. His employer isn't worried about it. There are loopholes for him, but not for René. There are lawyers for the boss, but not one René can afford. It's the same law, mind you. It's the same nation of laws, but the enforcement of said laws never feels even. It's a fine for the boss, and they can afford it. It's deportation back into the lion's den for the immigrant. René is waiting, knowing that ICE will enforce a law when it's convenient to enforce it, when it's politically palatable, offering the frightening optics of deterrence to other people from Guatemala who might dare to come here illegally. My friend René is not valued as a complete human being. The country doesn't mind when he pays taxes, and I know that he does. The landlord doesn't mind the green dollars that pays for the rent. The boss doesn't mind getting rich off René because he can pay him a substandard salary. He can get away with it. But portray someone like René as a taker or a criminal, and there are some who will feel justified then to enforce the law, even though he's neither a taker nor a criminal. Just ask a small Midwestern farming town how things turned out after an ICE raid collapsed the major employer, say like a chicken processing plant, or pummeled their real estate market. Who else is going to rent those apartments? Or ask a social service agency or churches how things turns out when the parents in a household were deported while their elementary school US-born kids were at school, and now they are left behind fearful they'll never see their parents again. Where is God when immigrants and their children suffer and are made out to be the enemy, are scapegoated or demonized? I mean, you and I can have a robust policy debate about immigration. Really, I like that kind of conversation about policy, and I don't mind differences of opinion about it. But just remember that as we have that conversation, we have immigrant children in cages at the border, waiting for somebody to treat them as human beings and not as political footballs or a mythical invading army. Where is God when we treat human beings as cogs in the wheel of the American economy? An economy, by the way, which purrs along in significant part because we have this invisible and disposable, undocumented workforce. We conveniently don't think about them when our lettuce is cheap, our lawns are pristine, and our roofs don't leak. And where is God when we find it politically convenient to be outraged for a moment and set those ICE officers on a raid to show them who's boss, to keep them afraid and on their heels, only then to return to the status quo of this purposefully invisible cheap labor? And if we ask, where is God? I think we ought to also ask, and where are we? Walk into the hospital this afternoon and walk to the ICU waiting room. There will be a family or two there drinking coffee and looking at their phones. They're waiting for all the reasons you can imagine. See them. See them in the waiting room. And then walk past them. We might say a prayer, good for us. But what does it feel like to walk past them and not wait with them? And by turn, what would it feel like if we turned around and waited with them as if our life depended on it? In the history of our country, we have treated immigrants with various degrees of hostility and welcoming, fear and gratitude. As an immigrant, as a naturalized citizen of this country, I can tell you that it feels like the floodwaters are rising right now. And I think this psalm is calling us to sit next to René at church and wait. Not for the ICE officers to deport him, but wait for God to reveal and reverse the injustice which traps people like René in a limbo of fear and shadows. And so we sit with him and we wait to follow God's lead. Thanks be to God for God's word for us. Amen.